I am paging Dr. Chanda.
I am the
Dr. Chanda.
And I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast, all things related to the Black culture.
Revolt. The doctor in front of your name.
What's up, family? It is Dr. Chanda. Tune in for another episode of Paging Dr. Chanda. All you have to do is keep watching. But listen, if you're just watching from the outside, just peeking through the window, I need you to commit. Come all the way in the house, and I need you to subscribe, like, and shoot me a comment in the comment section. I love responding to all of your comments. I love listening and reading how much you guys enjoy the topics that I'm talking about. So yeah, do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe, and join the tribe.
Stop scrolling for 1 second. This month, we are bringing back the psychology of Black women, the online class brought to you by yours truly, Dr. Chanda, licensed clinical psychologist. Y'all, I've been getting so many questions about why anxiety and depression presents differently in Black women. What do we do about it? How can we start to combat this? And what are some of the reasonings behind it? Listen, if you are a Black woman who has questions about anxiety and depression, it's something you experience or something your loved ones experience, or if you're a professional who works with Black women who experience anxiety and depression, I promise you this class is for you. Make sure that you sign up today.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me today.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Of course. So we're definitely going to hop into introducing you. I typically start off by saying hello to the audience, and I totally forgot to do that. So, hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast, where we talk about all things related to mental health, Black culture, and our faith. I'm your host, Dr. Chanda. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and y'all know we do this every single week where we talk about things that you guys are interested in, which is mental health. So make sure you guys continue to tune in, continue to share this video or audio version of the podcast wherever you're listening and tuning in from. And don't forget that this podcast is brought to you by the Revolt Podcast Network, which is anchored in hip hop and powered by creators. I am so excited to be here with Miss Tamu Lewis.
Thank you, Dr. Chanda.
Yes. So if you don't mind, would you mind introducing us to you and kind of letting us know who you are and what you do?
Yes, so I am Tamu Lewis. I am the co-founder and board president of the Lee Thompson Young Foundation, which my mom and I started in 2014 after losing my brother, actor Lee Thompson Young, to suicide in 2013. So we really wanted to help others become aware about mental health and really educate others and families and loved ones so that they could be more prepared and proactive and supportive when dealing with families and loved ones that have mental illness.
Yes, I cannot wait to dive deeper into some of the work that you and your mother are doing. But let me just first say, it definitely was a pleasure and honor to be able to grow up with your brother. And what I mean by that is I'm a millennial. So, of course, I didn't have the opportunity to actually meet him. But trust and believe, every day we came home from school, me and my cousins, we would turn on the TV and watch the famous Jett Jackson. And that was just a part of our routine. Like,
Right.
Literally felt like we grew up with the famous Jett Jackson. And so, just if you can kind of give us like a deeper dive into how it was growing up with Lee Thompson Young and how he was as a child actor in a very successful career.
Yes, so I am 12 years older than my brother. So I was like a junior mom. So he was always a very bright child, very inquisitive, talkative. I think he knew at the age of 10 that he wanted to be an actor. He asked my mom to get some business cards made for him. And she's like, well, what would the business cards say, Lee? And he's like, they will say Lee Thompson Young, actor. So he knew then, even prior to age 10, he would ask to volunteer at the local library, public library, to read stories to other children. So he'd be sort of performing as he read these stories, and he was involved in the local children's workshop theater, always at the top of his class in terms of academics. So just very bright and gifted all around, artistically, creatively, and academically.
Wow, that's amazing. So what was it like, kind of like transitioning in from wanting to pursue an acting career to actually being on the Disney Channel, which was huge?
Yes. So he initially, I believe, like the first big thing that at least I remember is like I think there was a Robitussin commercial that was national, and then there was a McDonald's commercial, and we went to these regional talent scouting type of events. And we went to one, I believe it was in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and that's where a New York manager and agent noticed him, and he won all the particular like contests in his age group. And after that, they basically convinced my mom to try it out for a summer, to go to New York and let the agent try to book him for the summer. And that's when he got the couple of national commercials. And then that's when she's like, okay, so we can go all in on this, and move to New York, so that he could pursue his career and go to the School of the Arts there. And then that's what kind of led to being on the Disney Channel.
Yeah. And so like the family transitioning to New York and being on the Disney Channel, I wonder, what was that shift like in the family?
Well, I think for my mom, it kind of all lined up because she was considering a second career at that time. And she got into a program at Union Theological Seminary to get her master's in divinity and then PhD. So she could do that in New York. And I'm 12 years older. So by that time, I'm out on my own. So she didn't have to be concerned with having to uproot me. So it was just really about my brother and giving him that exposure and opportunity. So I think, it's a transition, of course, moving from Columbia, South Carolina to New York. But I think everyone was just so excited and supportive of my brother. And we could see the talent and the love that he had and passion that he had for acting. So I feel like it was a fairly easy transition.
Yeah. So what was it like? Like, when did you realize that he was starting to grow in like his notoriety and like he was becoming quote unquote like famous?
I would say probably during the holidays when he had time off. He would always visit me here in Atlanta, and we would be out doing normal things, shopping or grocery store or whatever, and people would just be like, girls would just be losing it, like, and like, do you think I can say hello to him? I'm like, yeah, you can say hello to him. So I think then is when, when we saw the kind of general public that would come up or just kind of be starstruck, that's when we realized, oh, this is like a really big deal. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I definitely probably would have been one of the people starstruck,
Yes.
because it was just amazing to see just someone who would look like us on TV. Like, it was the representation that was so monumental at that time for us as kids.
Yes.
Like, amazing. I'm wondering, so like when you think about, Lee Thompson Young and the experiences that he's had growing up, when did you start to notice that he was experiencing difficulty with regard to like his mental health?
I would say late teenage years, so around 19 or so. And we didn't really have any exposure to someone who had been diagnosed or really know how to recognize any signs or anything like that. So I think around the age of 19, and I wasn't there, but my mom was in New York, where it was just maybe some odd behavior or like confusion, like nothing scary or anything like that, but just out of the ordinary. It didn't seem like himself. And I think that was the first time when she initially kind of reached out to a doctor just to make sure he was okay. But by the time, I think it was fast. So by the time they got to the doctor, the doctor is basically like relying on my brother to say what happened. And then my mom to talk about anything that she noticed. But by then it's like past tense.
Sure.
And it was over. So It was more like, just, get some rest. So they couldn't really diagnose anything because they didn't have enough to go off of. But that, 19 was the first time, I would say.
Okay. Okay. After about 19, is that when you guys started to notice like a pattern of behavior?
It was, in his case, it was hard to notice a pattern because there would be like years between anything coming up. And I think so, and this is just my opinion, of course, but I think because he was extremely talented and intelligent, I think he did a phenomenal job of masking it.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe your average person maybe not be able to mask it as well. So I think there were a lot of times when maybe he wasn't feeling like himself, but we couldn't tell because he didn't want for us to be able to tell. So I think after 19, it might have been a good, 5 years or so before something else happened outwardly that we could notice and then realize, okay, now we need professional support. And it lasted longer. So then the doctor had, evidence, so to speak, to be able to diagnose the bipolar disorder.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And so like, as you were speaking, I was definitely going to inquire about that because it seems like, your brother was very talented. You talked about him being very intelligent. Oftentimes when individuals are what we call like high achieving, it does become a bit more difficult for them to actually like present with symptoms that would make the disorders diagnosable at specific times. So it sounds like that probably played a role in that identifying the bipolar disorder.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So when he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I wonder like how did that impact him and also like the family?
So he made a decision to keep it to himself. So my mom knew and I knew and he knew, right? But he asked to keep it private. Sure. And I think that at the time, people still really weren't talking about mental illness and certainly not like bipolar disorder specifically and, how you could function or not. And I think he was really concerned about his career being blackballed in Hollywood. Yeah. So we, of course, like, okay, we won't tell anyone. He's seeing a psychiatrist. He's taking this medication. He seems fine. Like now we know, what we're dealing with. And so we honored his wishes, which, in hindsight, I would say if I knew then what I learned afterwards, I would have talked to him and try to convince him to at least let his community of support know in LA, because by then I live in Atlanta. My mom was on the East Coast. She was a professor at Howard University at the time. So there's no actual like family there with him. So I think it would have been helpful for some of his closest friends to know, because then if there were some signs, they would have context, right, to pick up on those and alert us or, reach out to mental health professionals or whatever his, safety plan would have been that he would have put in place. But I didn't know that. So, and high functioning again comes into play, right? Because I'm like, okay, wait, he seems fine, right? So that's where we left it. So what would happen anytime that he would feel off balance, and that's my term, he would call myself and or my mom and let us know. And then one of us would go to LA to support him. And he was so high functioning that it never impacted his work. Mm-hmm. He was always, there on set, nailing all the lines or whatever project he was working on. We would just be there, a week or so, go with him to the doctor and that kind of thing. And then he'd be fine again. Maybe sometimes there were some adjustments in medications, then he'd be fine again. And then we would leave and come back home and, go on with things.
That I think that really highlights how sometimes like the stigma associated with mental health can cause so many people to suffer in silence, like
Right.
going through so much, but feeling as though they have to keep it inside due to the fear of like what other people might think or say.
Right.
I wonder, like, did he talk about like the stigma at all, or like this overarching fear of that?
No, he didn't really. It was almost just like a, matter of fact, I'm not telling anybody, I'm fine and I can deal with this and I'll let you guys know when I need support. And like, that's it. There was not really any in-depth discussion about like stigma. It was just that initial time where he was like, I don't want it to negatively impact my career. I don't want people to judge me. And that's that.
Yeah. Do you feel as though, so like when you, in today's world, right? So many actors, so many artists are coming out and saying, I'm depressed, I have anxiety, I have bipolar disorder. And I wonder like what comes up for you when you hear so many people talking about it nowadays? Because you're right, back in, 2013 and before that, we weren't talking about this like that, especially in mainstream Hollywood.
Right, exactly. So it makes me feel good, actually. I am glad that people are talking about it. I think that's helpful. I think it does give others permission to reach out when they need help or when they, feel like something is off with them, even if they don't have a diagnosis or the words to articulate what's happening with them. So I think it's good that it is being discussed. I do, however, feel like sometimes that maybe is kind of glossed over. And of course, people share what they're comfortable with sharing. And anything you share, I think, takes courage. So I applaud that. But I don't want mental illness, and specifically in this case, bipolar disorder, to be sort of watered down, for lack of a better word, because it's different for each person too. So if you see, a particular celebrity, it comes out and says they have it, and they're like so successful, and they have the support that they need. I don't want everyone else to think that that is the case for anyone who has it, or that someone who has it can also achieve at that level, because maybe they can, but maybe not, depending on how it impacts them and what their actual symptoms are and their, specific circumstances.
Yeah. And I think that's why, your work that you're doing is so important. And even, hearing stories about Lee Thompson Young, because sometimes people do have that cookie cutter mindset, like depression only looks this particular way, or,
Right.
Bipolar disorder only looks this particular way. When in actuality, it's dynamic. Like there are so many different ways where how it can present in different people. So it's important to highlight like all of these stories. Yeah. So when thinking about overall, when Lee Thompson Young completed suicide, I wonder what was that like for you and the family to find out, and how did that impact you all?
Yeah, it was really difficult because for me, and I'll speak for myself, being 12 years older and sort of like his protector. I thought of myself as his protector, and then this happened. So then I feel like I failed him, right? I didn't protect him from this. And when he had called, which, he completed in August. So I saw him, February of 2013, he was not feeling like himself. He called, I went, I stayed a couple of weeks that time. Then everything was fine, came home. I ended up seeing him in July, so just a month before, in July in Hawaii, and we hadn't even planned it, but he was on a vacation and I was on a vacation with my husband and another couple. So we were able to hang out and everything. And he seemed fine, in Hawaii. And I'd probably talked to him a week. We normally talked at least once a week. So I talked to him like the week before he completed. So I felt angry. I felt guilty, like I missed something. How did I not know? And I ended up having to go to therapy to deal with the grief because it was just so heavy to me. And I felt like there were times I felt like I couldn't breathe. Meanwhile, I have a husband, a career, I had 2 daughters. So I couldn't just like collapse and ball up, but that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So very, just, very difficult and challenging for all of us. And, what came out of that was my mom saying, we have to educate people, because to be honest, myself, I didn't really become educated about it until we lost him, because he was just so high functioning. I'm like, okay, bipolar disorder. Okay, you take this medicine. You're so successful. You're doing all these things. He graduated with honors from University of Southern California, from their film and TV program. He was a National Merit Scholar in high school. So it was just, he seemed to be doing fine, except for these little episodes, or I call them little episodes, but except for these times. And so it was just, it was hard to deal with.
I can imagine. And I love how you not only highlighted grief, but there's anger associated with that. There was guilt associated with that. And oftentimes we don't realize like how complicated grief can be. Like it can have so many different types of emotions there. So I do appreciate that vulnerability that you're sharing.
Yes,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned something there, and I just kind of want to touch on it a bit. I feel especially as Black women, we have a lot on our plates, right? A lot of times we have the careers, we have the families, we have children that we have to tend to. But when we're going through, we feel like, how am I supposed to cope with these emotions and show up for my family and do everything else that's on my plate, right?
Right.
How did you kind of like manage the aftermath and cope with these things and put your own mental health at the forefront?
Well, I didn't initially, right? So I just kept pushing. I kept working and doing things with my girls. I just kept pushing forward because I felt like I had to. Mm-hmm. And it really had to come to me having like physical ailments, like actual physical chest pains. You know how they say you can actually have a broken heart?
Yes.
So I began to have these chest pains, and I would just be like driving, and all of a sudden I couldn't breathe, almost like a panic attack. Mm-hmm. And, as I mentioned, I was dealing with the anger. So at one point, I had to pull over because the pain got so bad in my chest, and I called my mom and I said, I shouldn't be dealing with all of this because I'm the one who stayed. Like, why is it so hard for me? And she was like, you have to get help. Like, you cannot get sick from this. You're going to end up, really doing harm in terms of my health, just trying to keep pushing and deal with all of this. So she was basically like, you have to. So what happened, I mentioned that I was in therapy. So that was talk therapy, right? But when the emotions just got to be too much and really impacting my physical health and how I could get through the day, my therapist was like, you're going to have to see a psychiatrist. So I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I didn't see a psychiatrist. And she's like, I think you need some medication that will really help you get through this period for the depression. And I was livid. So then I was really angry. Like, this is ridiculous. So then I was like, okay. Cause I kept thinking about my girls. Okay, I'll make this appointment. My husband traveled a lot. And so when the appointment was scheduled, he wasn't going to be here. And he said, is that okay? Or do you want me to chance? Oh, it should be fine. Well, the morning of, I got up to drive to this appointment with this psychiatrist, and I just froze. And then I just cried. Like, I didn't want to go, just crying about the state I was in, crying about the loss of my brother. And I thought, I told my husband it was fine, that I could make it to this appointment, right? So I'm like, okay, I get in the car, I'm crying. It takes like 30 minutes to get there. And I'm like, okay, what can I do to get myself to this appointment. And I called a relative who lives in town and my cousin. I asked him to meet me there. Okay, but still, I'm driving by myself. How am I still gonna get to this appointment? So then something said, call one of my girlfriends whose mom had died by suicide. She happened to answer, because this is a weekday, so she's at work, but she happened to answer, and she talked to me all the way till I got to the appointment. Wow. And when I got there, my cousin was there, so he could walk in with me and we could, do this. And it was, very helpful. It was just getting over whatever I had created in my mind about having to go to the psychiatrist and just the whole state that I was in. But once I got that help with the medication for, just a period of time to kind of get me through the rough patch, it was very helpful. So I do, disclose that information so that people know it's okay. And you might need different help than you think.
I know, I love that vulnerability, because so many people experience that level of discomfort and anxiety when it comes to seeing a therapist and even seeing a psychiatrist, like needing medication. And it's definitely nothing to be ashamed of.
Right.
So I do appreciate you for highlighting that. Yeah. It sounds like your support system played a significant role in you being able to kind of overcome that phase, that experience you were having. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I was just talking to my older daughter about the need for community, and that it's not that you need community because you have some challenges or a mental illness, but everyone needs community. So definitely the support of my family, my girlfriends, they had what they called a love circle, and they would just kind of be in tune of when they needed to call the love circle together. And they would come to my side of town and take me to dinner and just, talk to me about whatever, and, love on me. And it's this, whole group of sisters that were there, there to support me. And I remember my mom saying, because at the time she didn't live here in Atlanta. So she put together like a prayer circle. So, and I think it was maybe 5 women, one of which was my aunt. And so I think it was Saturday mornings at 8 a.m., I would call in and they would have this prayer circle for me. So there were multiple things that my support community did to help me through the process, which I really appreciate, because one of the things I remember when it was really tough was that I couldn't articulate it to anyone. I just couldn't find words to express the pain and all the emotions that I was having. And I also felt like I was alone. And of course, we tell people you're not alone, but I felt like I was alone, because I was like, well, I'm his sister. I'm not his mom. So people keep checking on my mom, but people, they're like, whatever, you're the sibling, right? And I was like, no, it is more than that. And we were really close. And my home was home. He came home here, 2-3 times a year, anytime he had a break. So it was, like I said, I just really felt alone. So anytime that my community could support me and not ask me for an explanation was great.
Yes, because we don't always have the explanation. Sometimes we cannot put into words how we're feeling, and that's okay. Yeah, that's why it's so important to have that supportive community that you highlighted. Even thinking about kind of like what you and your mom are currently doing with the Lee Thompson Young Foundation. Can you tell us a bit about when that was established and what came about your decision and what type of work that you're doing currently to continue the legacy?
Yeah, so I'll say this first. When you have a loss, they tell you not to make any major decisions in the first year, right?
Yes.
And we launched the foundation like a month after. So first thing, I don't recommend that because I kind of had to learn as I went. I'm trying to help people, but I'm like had just started the healing process, right?
Yes.
And so I would share sometimes and people would line up after the talks, to talk to me, but it had like literally just happened. So I would be so emotionally drained and exhausted afterwards. But I learned that, okay, I can present. Actually, I don't have to be the one to present. Other people can present, I don't even have to go. So anyway, so those things I learned as I went along through my healing journey. And initially, we really wanted to focus on youth. So we came up with programs where we would go talk to the youth in the schools. And we really wanted to support like parents and the teachers as well, because the youth are in school like most of the day, right? So we would do these workshops with the different audiences in the schools, and we would have like a licensed social worker or a licensed therapist would always be part of the team to be able to answer questions as a mental health professional, because I'm an advocate. I'm not a mental health professional, right? Okay. So we would do those things initially. And then the programs evolved to where prior to the pandemic, we had small group sessions in the public schools here in Atlanta, where the counselors would identify like 5 to 6 students who could benefit from a mental health professional coming in for once a week for 5 weeks, 5 consecutive weeks, to really build that relationship and teach them coping skills, right? Because challenges are going to come up, but it's about building resiliency and coping skills when these things do come up, and giving them the language to express themselves when there's something going on and it really is needing more mental health professional help. So we were doing those things up until the pandemic. And then, of course, we had to kind of shift to virtual, where we would have sessions with the school staff virtually to kind of help them support the students. And then now we just launched a mindfulness scholarship where we want to really focus on helping high school seniors who would be graduating and transitioning to college, because I think that is a challenging time. It's a transition, right? And so we provide them with financial support, but then also mental health support, peer support, but then mental health professionals too, to kind of do coaching sessions with them to help them with the transition.
That is amazing work that you all are doing. Seriously. Yes, because our students are struggling. Like in general, across the country, there is certainly a mental health crisis, especially when it comes to children of color, like Black children. And the fact that you all are like going out there in the trenches at the schools, I think that is really giving them the support that they need in order to overcome some of these life challenges.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm wondering, so how can people support the Lee Thompson Young Foundation, and where can we find you all?
Yes, so you can go to our website. It's ltyfoundation.org. So it's just my brother's initials, ltyfoundation.org. And of course, you can make a donation there. We have our scholarships applications open right now. So if you know any high school seniors, they are welcome to apply. And we tried to make the application like really simple, because we want it to appeal to the greatest number of students. So I think you have until May the 31st to apply for that scholarship. Awesome. And then I have a book that I wrote and published last year called Surviving the Mental Health Tank. You can find that on the ltyfoundation.org website as well. And we're on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. I cannot wait for the listeners to connect with you all, because again, the work that you're doing is amazing. Before we head out, Ms. Tamu, if you can kind of give us one piece of advice or just a level of insight, something that you would tell to someone who might be struggling and suffering in silence.
I would say, and that's hard, because people who are dealing with some challenges, I think you do feel alone and you do feel like people won't understand you. So I would say to use brain evidence, right? Because most of us are here and we aren't actually alone. So whether that's your family or your friends or even your coworker that you have a bond with, your classmate that you have a bond with. Like, think about your life prior to this moment that you're in when you're experiencing the challenges. Think about the things that you've already come through and maybe who's been with you along the way. And that can give you evidence that that is someone, right? Maybe I can reach out to them. Even if you don't know what to say, you can reach out to those people because you know they've been there before. So try to just remove yourself from that present moment and think about, what you've already been through, what you've already overcome too. And that can just give you some hope and some encouragement that you can make it through this too, and that you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful advice. Simply because when we feel alone, it doesn't always mean that we are alone. So
Right.
Leaning into that advice, I think will be so helpful for so many people. I appreciate you for coming through.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Chanda. I appreciate you having me.
For sure. We're definitely going to connect in the future. So make sure that you all connect with Ms. Tamu and the foundation, the Lee Thompson Young Foundation. So everything will be in the show notes. And make sure that you guys tune in next week as we continue these conversations. And don't forget that you have the power to create the emotions that you want to experience. God bless